Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you all for tuning in. Tonight, I want to talk about one of my favorite bands of all time, the mighty Van Halen. As you can see on my hat there, or on the shirt, one of my favorite bands of all time. And I want to kind of talk about how I got into this band, why I love them so much, and just spend the next however long this video takes talking about the great Van Halen. So, I was introduced to Van Halen from a friend of mine, same friend that introduced me to Kiss, actually, way back in September of 2002. I was at his place for a weekend, and he put on the cassette version of this, and we listened to the first half of it, Running with the Devil, Eruption, You Really Got Me, Ain't Talking About Love, I'm the One. I don't know why we didn't go to the second half, but I thought the first half was really cool. And that sort of put that seed or that idea in my mind for a few months later when I was with my dad in a shopping mall, and we were doing some Christmas shopping, and he bought me this, the CD version of Van Halen 1. And I remember putting this thing in the CD player in the car on the way home and listening to it and loving it. It just fell in love with it right off the bat. Of course, I already knew I liked the first half of it, but the second half to me was awesome as well. Tracks like Atomic Punk and Little Dreamer, which I always thought was a really, really cool deep cut. Ice Cream Man, On Fire, great stuff. And on the ride home, I just remember my dad telling me everything he knew about the band Van Halen and how, Van Halen had another singer named Sammy Hagar, and he was just telling me all the things that he knew about Van Halen, and I was just kind of soaking the album up, and was pretty much hooked right here. So, I don't remember how I came across this, but, and I can't even remember if this was before or after 5150, but I'm thinking it was before I got 5150. The greatest hits, Van Halen best of, and I don't remember if my dad had this and gave it to me, or if we got it somewhere, or what the story was. I just remember all of a sudden having this CD and listening to it, and of course, you got the first 8 tracks on here are Roth era tracks, Eruption, Ain't Talking About Love, Run with the Devil. I had all those on VH1. I really loved In the Cradle Will Rock. I really loved Unchained. I thought Jump was amazing. I thought Panama was amazing. Pretty much all the Roth stuff. I mean, I was a Roth junkie right from the get-go. And then you get into the Sammy Hagar stuff, and I didn't really actually get too far into the Hagar stuff, which will be noteworthy in a little bit. But I listened to the first few Hagar songs, like Why Can't This Be Love and Dreams. I thought they were good. I think I went down to Pound Cake and then just sort of fizzled out with the Hagar stuff and went back to the Roth stuff over and over again. But, yeah, I was hooked on the Roth stuff, but still, I was interested in the Hagar stuff, and I wanted a Hagar album, too. So the next time that I got a Van Halen album, which we're into February of 2002 at this point, I picked up 5150. And I had no idea back then. I knew which albums were Dave and which were Sammy, but I didn't know what were the fan favorites or whatever, or what was considered the best with each singer. So I had no idea that at the time that this is often considered the best with Sammy Hagar. It was just the only Hagar album that Walmart had, so I picked it up for that reason, because I wanted a full Hagar album. And I don't want to say I was disappointed, but because it's a good album, but it's no Van Halen 1 in my opinion. I liked Why Can't This Be Love and Dreams, which probably were my favorite 2 songs right off the bat. The other songs on here, like Good Enough, was okay. Get Up was okay. Summer Nights was really cringy. The first time I ever heard Summer Nights, it got to the line about me and the boys wanting to make some love with the human toys, and I instantly hit next. I couldn't do it at that point, and I wasn't, like, I'm not into the chorus. Summer Nights is just not my jam. I'm also not a big fan of Best of Both Worlds either. That's like the one Van Halen hit that if I hear it on the radio, I'll probably just change the station. Any other Van Halen hit, like even Love Walks In, When It's Love, I'll crank it up. But for whatever reason, I just never cared for Best of Both Worlds. Love Walks In, decent. Inside is kind of a fun, cool way to end the album. It's not really meant to be taken seriously, so I never did, but I always thought it was kind of cool. The one song on here that I actually don't remember the first time I heard it is the title track 5150. And it's funny now because 5150 is probably my favorite song on the album. I just remember sometime months down the road when I had this album playing and just hearing 5150 and thinking, holy crap, this song is amazing. And I don't even remember the first time I heard it. Every other song on here I do, but I don't remember the first time I heard 5150. But somewhere down the line, it just instantly clicked with me how great that song is. But I do think now that's probably my favorite song on this album, 5150, a great deep cut. But even though I was sort of on 5150, I thought it was good, but it wasn't like, it didn't blow me away the way Van Halen 1 did. I was still really interested in checking out the rest of this band, both the Roth and the Hagar era. So fast forward to March 2nd specifically of 2003. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I was downstairs with my dad. He was working on his paperwork. We were getting ready to watch the NASCAR race. They were running in Las Vegas Motor Speedway that weekend. And Matt Kenseth won the race that weekend. I'm going to point out because Matt Kenseth was one of my favorite drivers back then. But my mom went over to Walmart, and before she went, I asked her if she would get me a CD, kind of expecting her to say no. But she did. She agreed to get me one. So she asked me, well, which one do you want? I said, well, these are the 3 Van Halen albums I have. I want another one. I don't care which. I said that, but I did actually, I was hoping for 1984, I think, first and foremost. And Diver Down was pretty high on my list, I think, because it wasn't represented on the best of. Van Halen 2. If she got me a Hagar album, I was hoping for like maybe for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. But probably one of the last albums that was on my mind was the one that she actually brought home for me, which was Fair Warning. But I was happy to have it, so I plugged this thing into my CD player, and the instant that guitar solo comes through the speakers on Mean Street, I wasn't quite 13, my little 12-year-old mind was blown to bits. That is such a cool intro. One of the coolest things I've ever heard on a guitar, still to this day. And then it gives way to one of the baddest ass riffs I think I've ever heard in my life with Mean Street. Oh man, and then I just love the way that Roth comes in with the vocals. I mean, it's such a heavy, down and dirty, heavy rock track. It is so awesome. Mean Street's probably my favorite Van Halen song, if I'm being honest. I mean, I don't know. I freaking love Mean Street, and that hooked me. That hooked me more than Van Halen 1 did, and I don't know how it was possible, because Van Halen 1 was a pretty big hook, but as soon as I heard Mean Street, Van Halen pretty much became my new favorite band at that point. I mean, they had leapfrogged the other groups that I was already into, and I think that point right there, more than anything, solidified my Van Halen obsession for the next almost year. I've spent pretty much the rest of 2003 being totally obsessed with Van Halen. Dirty Movies, cool song. Hear about it later. There's just something about the cleaner sounding songs in here. That guitar tone on these like cleaner tracks is so rich. It's like so amazing. I don't know how to describe it. It's just almost mind-boggling to me. But then you got like the really cool heavy shit too, like Unchained. Great song. I had that one on. I knew I liked that one because I had that on best of. I always thought Sunday Afternoon in the Park and One Foot Out the Door were really cool too. They really wind the album down really quickly. Like the album almost feels incomplete just because those last 2 songs are so short and so bizarre. But they're really cool. I think those 2 songs really contribute to the overall vibe of this album. Now, I did not play Sinner Swing because my mom was up and down the stairs and coming in and out of the room that we were in, and just looking at the track title, I didn't know that I wanted her to hear that song. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's ever had to deal with that, but that's the way it was. I guess I was happy she didn't look at the track listing when she bought it for me, but my dad probably wouldn't have cared, but I decided to skip over that one for now. And it's not like I didn't have 8 other awesome songs to listen to. I mean, I pretty much listened to Mean Street the rest of the day too. I mean, Hear About It Later, and yeah, I had this one playing pretty much the rest of the day. But I took the CD with me to school the next day, and I played it on my little portable CD player, and I went directly to Center Swing. Oh man, Mean Street. I would have never ever thought that Center Swing would be like on par with Mean Street for me, but it really is. I think Center Swing is one of the most underrated Van Halen songs. That riff is so awesome, and Dave's vocal delivery is pretty much why I'm a Dave guy. I mean, never mind the fact that I think the band just was hungrier, they were heavier, they were more innovative. I just think the band was on fire more in the Roth era. But even head to head, just Dave versus Sammy. Yeah, Sammy's got the better range, and I have nothing against Sammy Hagar or his era or anything. But what Dave does, the way that he delivers the vocals, he's a much better lyricist than Sammy for one. I mean, Sammy can write good lyrics, but he's extremely hit and miss. Back then, I mean, everything Roth wrote was pretty much gold. Later on in his career, maybe not as much, but back in the heyday, Roth was pretty much 100%. And his vocal delivery, with what the voice he has and the range he has, he just delivered some great stuff. And it's on full display in Center Swing. I just love Dave's vocal delivery in that song. I don't know what else to say about it. But this was the album right here that hooked me for good and really, really kickstarted my Van Halen obsession. So, fast forward to the end of April now, and I got for my birthday this one right here. And I specifically asked for Diver Down for my birthday, partially because it wasn't represented. It's the only Roth album not represented on the best of. But also, I don't know, there's just something about it. I don't know. It's really not like a incredible album cover or anything, but for whatever reason, I just had a thing for this album. I wanted to get it. I wanted to hear it. I don't know why. I just did. But I asked for this one specifically for my birthday. And I don't remember what day of the week my birthday was on, but I remember this came in the mail on a Friday. When I got home from school, it was waiting for me. And I plugged this thing in Friday afternoon, and pretty much instantly, just like Fair Warning, fell in love with it. When Where Have All the Good Times Gone, which I didn't realize at the time that was a cover song. I found that out, a couple months later maybe. But as I was first hearing it, I didn't realize it was a cover song. I thought it was really awesome. Hang 'em High, barn burner of a Van Halen song. Great guitar work from Eddie. The riffs are amazing. The solo's amazing. Dave's amazing. It's just a classic Van Halen track. Cathedral I always thought was really cool. Secrets is a really cool, more melodic track. I love Intruder. One of my favorite guitar solos from Eddie. I love that one. Intruder is so awesome. Pretty Woman's a good cover. Dancing in the Streets, probably my least favorite on the album, but also probably my favorite version of the song I've ever heard. Little Guitars is pretty much a masterpiece. I mean, just go and listen to Eddie's isolated guitar track on YouTube from Little Guitar. It's so awesome. And then just, that doesn't account for the fact that everybody else's part in the song is awesome too. It's just a great Van Halen song. Big Bad Bill, Sweet William Now, fun little track. Full Bug, that one was one that really clicked with me right off the bat. I love the guitar work in that one. It was one of my favorite songs right away. Happy Trails is a fun little way to close the album. I had no idea that this was supposed to be the worst Roth album when I was 13 years old. All I knew is that I was happy to have it. I played it. I loved it. This album just has a really fun summertime vibe to it. It just has a great sound to it. And the whole weekend, I played it all weekend, all night Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. I didn't really do much else. I mean, I was pretty much just in my own little world at that point in time, and happy to be so. I mean, there was nothing else that I wanted to do other than just listen to this and be in my own little world. But I just remember the weather was perfect. I mean, it was, late April. The weather was warmish, but not too hot. And I'm not a big fan of like real hot weather. So it was, I can't remember specific digits, but I would venture to say it was probably like around 70, like all weekend. It was just like that really perfect temperature. And that just cemented this album for me. in my mind like that. And I always think about that weekend, think about that gorgeous springtime, early summertime weather that we were having, and I was just lost in this album all weekend. It's one of the reasons why I love this album so much. Like I said, I had no idea that this was supposed to be the worst Roth album. I didn't, it didn't matter to me. I loved it when I first heard it. I thought the covers were great. I thought the originals were great. I didn't even realize Where Have All the Good Times Where Have All the Good Times Gone was a cover. I knew the other ones were covers, but I didn't know that one was a cover for some reason. Still didn't take anything away when I found out it was a cover. It just became my favorite Van Halen cover of all time. Thought the instrumentals were cool. Thought the sound was amazing. I don't know. Awesome. This is however long this album is, 31 minutes, 32 minutes, whatever it is. It is 31 minutes, 32 minutes of pure bliss to my ears. I love Diver Down, and I make no apologies for it. So fast forward another month, and we're somewhere around Memorial Day at this point, late May. I wasn't quite out of school yet, but I'm pretty sure it was like Memorial Day weekend, give or take a week maybe. And I was in the next town over with my parents, and my dad and I went into Circuit City, and I got 2 Van Halen albums. Had to get a Roth album. Had to. So I picked up 1984, and I decided to take a shot with another Hagar album. I got For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. So the first one that I played was 1984, and it was as awesome as I expected it to be. Jump, which I loved, still do. Panama. Now, I'd never heard Hot for Teacher up to this point, and I thought Hot for Teacher was incredible. The way that song starts off, it almost sounds like a comp car from the NHRA at the starting line waiting to take off. It's just badass drum intro. The guitar works amazing as well. Classic Van Halen song. Top Jimmy, really cool underrated cut on here. Drop Dead Legs, I think, is a fan favorite. Has sort of an AC/DC vibe to it. I'll Wait is another cool song. Synthesizers or not. House of Pain is a killer way to close this thing out. Just another great Roth album, in my opinion. Loved it instantly. And then after that, I played this one, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And this one really kind of blew me away. I think my expectations were a little bit lower. I still expected to like this, but my expectations were certainly lower than the Roth albums at this point. Pound Cake I heard because of the greatest hits. And then the next song goes into is Judgment Day, which is one of the heavier, more aggressive tracks that they do with Sammy Hagar. So right off the bat, I was thinking, wow, this album's going to be something else. I mean, because we're off to a pretty heavy start here. And still, Judgment Day is one of my favorite Hagar tracks to this day. There's some other great songs on here. Run Around. I really love the way this album closes out. The Dream Is Over has always been one of my favorites on here right now. 316, Top of the World. The only 2 songs on here I never cared for, Spanked and Pleasure Dome. Never did care for them. But still, a great album. Pretty solid. This one really, I guess, upped the Van Hagar stock for me a little bit. So, there you go. So now we're getting more into the summer of 2003. I don't specifically remember when this was. It was probably in June at some point, I would think. I picked up Women and Children First. And this is the first and only Roth album that I ever got. And the first time I listened to it, I didn't really care for it. The second time I listened to it, I thought it was freaking amazing. So it was just one of those albums that I think it just took, I don't know, it just took some time to really grow on me. And it didn't take, I don't know, it only took like 1 or 2 listens. But in The Cradle Will Rock, I knew I loved that song from the Hits album. And then Everybody Wants Some, Fools, Romeo Delight is really awesome, Lost Control, Take Your Whiskey Home, Could This Be Magic, In a Simple Rhyme, great stuff. This one is the ultimate, to me, this one's the ultimate party album. I think this one just feels like the guys were kind of buzzed in the studio in a good way and just having fun. And I don't know, there's just something about this one that is kind of the ultimate party album for me. And it took a listen or two but eventually I loved it as much as the other Roth albums, and to this day still do. So Women and Children First, another great Roth album. The last Roth album that I had to collect, and again, we're probably, I don't think it was too far after Women and Children First, actually, but this one right here, Van Halen 2. These next couple albums, I think I got all in pretty quick succession to one another. But the last Roth album that I had to collect was Van Halen 2. And I don't know why it took me, I don't know why I waited to get Van Halen 2 last. But I loved it when I first heard it. DOA, I think I was one that really, really struck me. Somebody Get Me a Doctor is really cool. Out of Love Again and Light Up the Sky, I thought were two cool tracks. Out of Love Again actually was like my least favorite song on this album the first couple times I listened to it. And then it began to grow on me. Light Up the Sky, I've always loved. Spanish Fly. Women in Love, just that first 30 to 45 seconds where Eddie's playing like the clock sound on the guitar is one of the sweetest things I've ever heard on a guitar. Great album. And this one actually spent some time as my favorite Van Halen album for a while, actually. A couple times, I think, it actually rose to the top of my list. So Van Halen 2. Yeah, I love this one. Don't really have much else to say about it. I just remember summertime of 2003, and not to sidetrack here for a minute, but I remember seeing or hearing one of my coworkers was telling me about an article they saw. I don't know where this happened, but apparently there were some young teenagers, 12, 13, 14 years old, who broke into somebody's house and stole a gun or something. I don't know. I don't remember where that was at or what it was, but I just remember us talking about it, and it's like, dang, when I was 13 years old, I was still playing with Matchbox cars. I wasn't stealing no one's gun and breaking into no one's house. It's just, when I was 13 years old, I took my CD player out on my parents' deck, and I played Van Halen 2 and played with my toy race cars on the deck. I mean, that was like the best thing ever. I mean, honestly, I'm 33 right now. If I could do that again, I probably would, but it might seem a little weirder for a 33-year-old to be doing that as opposed to a 13-year-older. But those are some grand memories, and honestly, I don't know. I was always kind of one of those kids that somewhat of a loner, and I was happy just to be left in my own world, playing Van Halen CDs. And I remember playing Van Halen 2 a lot out on my parents' deck for whatever reason. I don't know why this is my favorite one to play on the deck, but for whatever reason it was. And Van Halen 2, I don't know why, but Van Halen 2 is like the nighttime album for me. This one, to me, is the one that I would just blast on a hot summer night. Not 5150 and not summer nights, sorry. But this is the one, just a beautiful night where I wanted to go driving around or whatever. I would crank this one full volume, because that's just the feel of this album to me. It's like summer night album. I see a lot of people say Van Halen 2 is the ultimate summer album. For me, kind of, but it's like a summer night album to me. I don't know why, but there you have it. So the next one I picked up was OU812. Pretty much just rounding out the collection at this point. I loved Mine on Mine the first time I heard it. The rest of this album, some decent stuff. AFU Naturally Wired, Cabo Wabo. Source of Infection I always kind of liked. The back part of this album I've never cared for that much. Black and Blue is a decent song, but the last two songs on here I have never liked. Sucker and a Three-Piece and Apolitical Blues. Didn't like them when I first got the album. Still don't care for them today. Otherwise, I think OU812 is a fine album. Just those last two songs kind of ended on sort of a sour note for me. So, decent album, all things considered. Not a fan of the way the CD sounds. The CD is just like really, really quiet. It doesn't really make much of an impact. I don't know what it is. I have this both on vinyl and cassette as well. I think both of those sound better than the CD. But for the longest time, I only had the CD. So I think that kind of hurt my feelings about the album a little bit. So what I actually wanted, the Hagar album that I wanted to get for the longest time, but nobody had it. Anywhere that you would go to buy CDs back in 2003, Walmart, Circuit City, Best Buy, FYE, whatever other music store was in the mall, nobody had Balance. So I had to order this one. And this is 4th of July. This came right before 4th of July for me. And when it came, instantly, I don't know. This album just has a sound and a feel, and Eddie's guitar just has a really rich tone to it. And it's kind of deep and it's kind of heavy. And I don't know. It's just something amazing about the way this album sounds to me. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get this album was because, as I mentioned earlier, it took me a long time to sort of venture into the Hagar tracks off this one here. But as I began to, Can't Stop Loving You grabbed my attention. And back in these days, I was not necessarily a ballad guy. I mean, ballads pretty much had to work a little extra hard for me to be a big fan of them. So it was unusual for me to love Can't Stop Loving You the way that I did. I mean, I liked Dreams and Why Can't This Be Love, but I didn't like them near as much as all the heavy Roth stuff, or Pound Cake, or Judgment Day. But when I heard Can't Stop Loving You, I was really blown away. Between the guitar tone, the guitar playing from Eddie, Sammy's lyrics, which I think are some of his best, his voice in that song is incredible. I thought it was just almost a perfect rock ballad. And I still to this day really, really love Can't Stop Loving You. It's probably my favorite Van Hagar track. And I wanted Balance because it had that song on it. And back then, you couldn't just get on YouTube and listen to whatever you wanted. It wasn't all up there. YouTube wasn't even a thing in 2003. But you could get on like Van Halen's website and like VH1, I think, Walmart maybe. And you could listen to like little samples of tracks, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. And because I could never find this album, I took to listening to like the little samples of them. And the little sample of The Seventh Seal sounded so awesome. So between that little sample of The Seventh Seal and the song Can't Stop Loving You, I wanted to get Balance in the worst way. So finally, my parents just ordered it online for me, and it came 4th of July, leading up to that week, some point. I don't remember what day 4th of July fell on, but sometime up to our 4th of July festivities is when this album arrived. And to this day, this album is synonymous with 4th of July to me. So every year on 4th of July, I have got to listen to this album. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a Van Halen kick or not. Like, I will stop and listen to this album at some point around the 4th of July because it's an absolute must. But this one pretty much instantly became my favorite Van Halen or Van Hagar album. Seventh Seal, Can't Stop Loving You, Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do, Amsterdam. Aftershock just has a really cool sound to it as well. Ballad Erythium I've always loved. Take Me Back. There's just a vibe to this album I really, really love. So I was happy to finally have it in July. So that was not necessarily the end of my Van Halen obsession now that I had pretty much all the studio albums except for Van Halen 3. But I was still kind of full-blown in a Van Halen kick. And one of my favorite things about that summer, I got to ride in my dad's truck a lot with him. So I went, he used to go all over I'm from Pennsylvania. He used to go to like New Jersey. His terminal was in New Jersey, and he would go to like Ohio and, the states that kind of bordered Pennsylvania. Every now and then he might kind of go farther and whatnot, but pretty much he stayed kind of in this relative area. But I got to ride with him in the truck a lot. And these albums to me, I just remember listening to a lot of Van Halen in my dad's truck. And the one I think that really sticks out to me is 1984. For whatever reason, I just really remember riding with my dad over to New Jersey and back, and blaring 1984 in his truck. There was one trip I went with. It was the longest trip I ever went with him in his truck. We went to New Jersey, and then we went to somewhere in southern Pennsylvania. I don't remember exactly where. And then we went back to New Jersey and back home. So I was with him for a couple of days, actually, which is the longest. I usually only spent maybe a day or two with him in the truck, but this was the longest trip I took with him in his truck. And I just remember we were playing Balance, and every time I hear Ballad Erythium, I think of that trip to me. So it's some great memories too. I also specifically remember that was NASCAR was racing at Watkins Glen that weekend, and we turned the radio on to listen to it on Sunday, and the very first thing they said was something about Rusty Wallace spun out or Rusty crashed or something bad happened to Rusty Wallace, and I instantly thought, well, we might as well turn it off now, because Rusty was one of my guys. He was my favorite old school driver back then. So, yeah, that's fresh in my mind too for whatever reason. But yeah, so a lot of these albums I just have good memories riding with my dad in his truck, and like I said, I was kind of in my own little world back in those days, and never was happier, I guess. So after Balance, I don't remember when, sometime late in the summer, I got the Van Halen video hits. Got to sort of watch all the music videos. That was a lot of fun. And even though most of these are Hagar songs, which are fine. I mean, I enjoy the Hagar stuff too. You know, Run Around is a good video. Dreams was a good video. But it was those 3 Roth videos at the beginning that just, I don't know, man. Jump. Just watching the guys on Jump. Jump is such a plain video, but it's so fun. Just watching them up on stage. They look like the happiest guys in the freaking world, which is a pretty good act because at that point in time they were about to break up. But just watching the video for Jump, they sure could have fooled you. I mean, just Eddie playing with a big smile on his face. And I love the fact that even though it's clearly synthesizer, Eddie's just kind of playing his guitar like he doesn't care. Just big smile on his face. It's so awesome. I mean, Eddie Van Halen was the man. That's all there is to it. I mean, you had Al Backer on his drums and David Lee Roth doing his David Lee Roth things at the front. Awesome stuff. I love the video for Jump. Panama gives you a little bit more with like the airplane at the beginning, and then there's Dave's in handcuffs at one point and riding in a car, and then they're playing on that really humongous stage. Panama's a great video too. And Hot for Teacher is hilarious. My 2 favorite parts is when they have like the young alter egos, and then during the chorus when they're all dressed up in like those like orange creamsicle suits and they're doing the dancing. It is funny. It is those Roth videos are the ones that I could just watch all day long. The Sammy ones are good too, but in case you can't tell, I'm a Roth guy. Nothing against Sammy Hagar, but I'm most definitely a David Lee Roth guy. So I sort of wrote out the rest of 2003 on all this great material that I had. And in 2004, they announced a tour with Sammy Hagar, and the second one was actually in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and that's the one that I went to with my dad. And turns out it's the only time I ever get to see Van Halen live, so I was happy I went. I've heard people review that concert and say it wasn't a very good show. I didn't know any different. I didn't have anything to compare it to, really. But despite the fact that it was supposedly not a very good show, I'm just happy that I saw Van Halen live. I mean, especially now that Eddie's not with us anymore. This is the only time I ever got to see him live, regardless of who the front man was. Sammy Hagar, David Lee Roth, doesn't matter. I was just happy to see them. And I just specifically remember Eddie was wearing the kind of like the red and white and black stripes on like his overalls. And he had his hair kind of like sticking straight up in the air. It was a really odd do, but it was memorable to say the least. And Sammy Hagar was kind of dressed like Ronald McDonald. He had like a yellow shirt on and red pants. And back in 2004, he kind of had like that semi-afro thing going on. He honestly looked like he could have painted his face and he'd have been Ronald McDonald, is what it always reminded me of. But I'm just glad I got to see him live at this point. The 2 things from that concert I think that stand out more than anything to me is Michael Anthony singing Somebody Get Me a Doctor, which was awesome. And when they played Right Now, and you know how in the music video of Right Now, the whole video is basically, right now, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, just all these different things happening right now would come across the screen. Well, when they were playing the song, at one point, the screen that was kind of on the stage, Right Now, Ed Feels Great, and the place just erupted. It was kind of a goosebump moment for me. I think probably for a lot of Van Halen fans that were there, I would imagine. So, fast forward another couple years. I didn't pick up Van Halen 3 till around 2006, actually. I found it in a used bin for like $2. Figured I might as well round out the collection. I had heard how bad this one was supposed to be, and I pretty much agreed. I've got a bunch to say about Van Halen 3, which I'm going to save for another video. But clearly my least favorite Van Halen album. Still, yeah, I have another video where I'm going to talk a lot more about Van Halen 3 in depth. So we're going to move on from that one for now and come to the very last Van Halen album. This was released in 2012 with David Lee Roth on vocals, Wolfgang Van Halen on bass. And even though I, along with everybody else, miss Michael Anthony's presence on here, Wolfie's a great musician. I have, in retrospect, now that Eddie's not with us anymore, I'm glad that Wolfie had the time to play in the band with his dad. So I can't really knock that. Sure, we all miss Michael Anthony, and I think we all just wish that the Van Halen camp would be so much less dramatic than it is. But they gave us one last really good album. I'm glad we have this as a swan song instead of Van Halen 3. I'm glad I got to experience a brand new album with Van Halen. Tattoo may not be the greatest song in the world, but it was cool to hear a new Van Halen song for the first time. You got some other great stuff on here. She's a Woman, You and Your Blues, As Is, incredible. One of my favorite Van Halen songs. I think the one song on this album that I could really say I love it as much as any of those classic Van Halen songs, As Is. Any of the classic Roth albums, I would put As Is right up there. I love that one. Big River's really cool. Really good stuff here. I mean, David Lee Roth, I don't think has the same magic that he had back in the day, but I think the rest of the band sounds really good. Dave sounds all right. Pretty good album. Like I said, I'm glad we have this one as a swan song as opposed to Van Halen 3. And unfortunately, you know, Eddie left us a couple years ago. We now have Wolfgang Van Halen carrying the torch. He's got his own thing going with Mammoth, and that seems to be a polarizing thing amongst some Van Halen fans. But in my opinion, I'm glad Wolfie's just doing his own thing. I don't think he needs to be his dad. He doesn't need to be his uncle or anything like that. So I'm glad he's making the music that he's making. It's the music he wants to make. I think it's pretty good. You know, is it Van Halen? Is it, you know, this stuff here? No, I wouldn't expect it to be either. It's kind of unfair to hold him to his dad's standards, in my opinion. But, you know, I got nothing against Wolfgang Van Halen. I hope he keeps on doing what he's doing. So there we have it. Van Halen. Love this band to this day. One of my favorites. Let me know how you guys got into Van Halen. Where did you first hear of them? How were you introduced to the band? What kind of impact do they have on you? I would love to hear that in the comments. So if you like this kind of content, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos in the future. And I will see you next time.